Good afternoon. Today I'll be doing the defense of my paper that dealt with the integration era of baseball cards. And what I was looking at was how did post-war baseball cards from Bowman and Topps Company, how did they shape and possibly reflect societal attitudes towards race during this time period? And I especially looked at Jackie Robinson, Willie Mays, and Hank Aaron. Of course, there's other African-American players too, but I went ahead and chose these three because they were probably the biggest figures of that time period between 1947 and the early 1960s. Now, the reason why I was looking at this study was one thing that I came across was there wasn't many studies, whether historical or economic, on what was written on these cards. There are some books and stuff that discuss the nostalgia of collecting cards, but actually looking at the cards text themselves and how they were, the pictures and stuff that were used for them, not much has been done on that. Actually, there hasn't been anything done on that from what I have been able to find. No dissertations, nothing that's actually looked at the text of the cards. So I wanted to look at to see how this mass-consumed product of baseball cards, how it could possibly, with the text on it, how could it influence that generation of white baby boomers. So, of course, my key primary sources that I use, of course, 12 of Jackie Robinson's cards from his 1948 Leaf rookie all the way up until his 1956 Topps card, which would be the last of during his playing career, and how there was a shift in narrative there. Also used 8 Willie Mays cards from his rookie card up until the early 1960s, and the same with Hank Aaron. I did 7 of his baseball cards within the primary sources. I was also able to find some forums that discuss collecting baseball cards at that time, which would reinforce what I was thinking about with the white baby boomers being influenced on what these companies were writing about these players. They weren't seeing race anymore. They were seeing great athletes. And you could definitely see that in the forums that I was able to find. You could also, I found some advertisements from like a Cincinnati newspaper and then also some other periodical articles that were written that showed Willie Mays and Hank Aaron being glorified, wanting to be collected by these white baby boomers. So that kind of just reinforced a little bit that the baseball cards did have an impact on these young people in how they viewed race and also how they viewed greatness of a ball player. Some of the findings that I found, of course, were if you look at Jackie Robinson's early cards, his 1948 Leaf, his 1948 Old Gold cigarette card, you're going to see that they mention him as a pioneer, that he was the first Negro in baseball, and that he, it was groundbreaking. He had his 1948 Swell card. He had a dramatic debut. He made an impact. But by 1952, this is going to shift. This racial narrative is going to shift completely away to just merit-based. By the time you get to his 1956 Topps card, he's now considered one of the greatest Dodgers of all time, and there is no mention of him breaking the color barrier at all. Now, when you take Willie Mays and Hank Aaron into look at their cards, there is no mention at all that they were racial pioneers, even though they only came a couple years later after Jackie Robinson. I mean, they were still facing some of the same struggles that Jackie faced. What's interesting, though, is you can still see, even though race is not mentioned, you can still see some subtle tactics used by these companies to help, I guess, make the white consumer more open to Hank Aaron and Willie Mays. Like on one of the Hank Aaron cards, I believe it was the 1954 Topps, they had a cartoon strip on the bottom that showed that Hank Aaron was giving away gifts to his white teammates, showing that he, is respected by his white teammates and that he's a giving person. It's just kind of a subtle thing that you see in this card, but it's one that's quite interesting to look at. Another one was how, they didn't start organized baseball until they actually began their minor league careers, which totally took away what Hank Aaron and Willie Mays, what they did when they played in the Negro Leagues. So they didn't consider their start in baseball until they actually played in Major League Baseball. So that was quite interesting to look at also. Now, another thing that I noticed at the end of looking at the early 1960 cards, especially those subset cards that were the baseball thrills or the highlight cards. Willie Mays, of course, they had a great highlight card of his amazing catch in the 1954 World Series. And of course, that play is being made iconic. A play that, will stick in the heads of many young collectors of that time period, whether they're white or black. The same thing with one of the highlight cards for Hank Aaron hitting a home run in the 1957 World Series, and out-dueling Mickey Mantle at that time because they were able to beat the Yankees in 1957. So on that one card, you have Hank Aaron and Mickey Mantle, a white Hall of Famer that is, a great player, and also a black Hall of Famer who was also a great player, being put on the same card during a time period that, we hadn't even got to the Civil Rights Act of 64 or the Voting Rights Act. So still in a heavy part of segregation, but it's reinforcing that these players, doesn't matter about race, they're based on merit now. They're based on being great. And young consumers of that time, white baby boomers, had to be impacted by that. And through a few of the stories that I found, you could see that because they're considered their favorite players. And people reminiscing about that, they want to find those cards. And those cards do have a lot of value. I own a few of them, and I know they're quite expensive. So in conclusion, just looking at this, I think baseball cards, they're definitely a cultural artifact that needs to be studied more. I don't think they've been studied enough, beyond just some simple books that have been written. But I think there's more historical there that, you can look at, cards of almost every generation and look at their importance. You can definitely see a transition from the post-racial narrative, that kind of moved away from these players' struggles that they faced early on in their career and kind of, tried to put them with the greats that were white, like Mickey Mantle and stuff, that they have earned their place in baseball. So that was quite interesting to see. So I believe baseball cards, there's more to it. I believe you can find it. I feel like there could be more of a study done with this. It could be further looked at and analyzed, maybe taking some other African American stars and looking at their cards also. Thank you and have a great day.